My name is Halal, and I'm going to tell you about Charles A. Lindbergh. It is important to the 1900s because they wanted to see how far a plane would go. Charles A. Lindbergh was born on February 4, 1902 in Detroit, Minnesota. He grew up in a farm at Little Falls at Minnesota. In 1923, he was taught how to drive a plane. Lindbergh got better and better that he wanted to be a daredevil. In 1924, he was in the Army Air Force service. In 1927, May 20, Lindbergh was ready to fly to New York to Paris. He flew on his plane, the Spirit of St. Louis. When he flew in the air, he did a lot of stuff to stay awake. He would head out the window to feel the cool breeze. Then he thinks about when they built this plane. He thought of all those things to stay awake. On February 12, 1928, Charles Lindbergh married Annie Morrow. They had a child named Charles Lindbergh Jr. This fact surprised me was when Charles Jr. got kidnapped on 1931. The kidnapper murdered Charles Jr. This was important because Charles Lindbergh went so far non-stop all the way to New York to Paris. He flew even more than 3,600 miles away. He changed forever how we view airplane flying.
Hello, my name is Anthony, and I'm going to explain how and why the United States decided to join the Allies in the Great World War I. It all started with the murder of Archduke Francis Ferdinand and his wife Sophie in Sarajevo on June 28, 1914. After the assassination, Austria-Hungary declared war on Serbia on June 28, 1914. Days later, Germany declared war on Russia and France and mobilized its forces towards Belgium. Britain then joined to help France and Belgium. Thus, within 5 days, the European countries were at war with each other. Another starting event was when a German U-boat torpedo hit the RMS Lusitania. Americans were on this cruise ship and many lost their lives. Americans were outraged. The final two incidents that pushed America into war was the reintroduction of Germany's sink-at-sight submarine tactic on February 1st, 1917, in the Zimmermann telegram. The German Foreign Minister Arthur Zimmermann sent a coded message to Mexico. In it, he guaranteed Mexico would get back Southwest America if they would join the Central Powers. Britain decoded the message, and it was the final straw for America. On April 6, 1917, Congress formally declared war on Germany. Those were the important events that led to the reasons why America joined the Great War or World War I.
Hi, my name is Brian. I'm learning about World War I. Did you know the first flamethrower came from World War I's technology? It was good that we invented steel helmets too for the war. What surprised me is the German had only 20 tanks and the US had less than 100. But the British had 2,636. The most tanks I've ever imagined is the French had 3,870. And chemical warfare, which then led to gas masks, and IQ tests for the soldiers for the U.S. Army. If we lost the World War I, the U.S. could have been destroyed or ruled by a dictator, or worse. But I can't believe what would happen at the end.
Hi, my name is Alan, and I'm going to tell you why World War I is important to 1900s. The Germans mobilized 140,000 men were assembled for the attack. Entire villages were evacuated to make room for them. The most impressive was the guns. The guns were to do the bleeding whites the guns came as far away as Russia and back in since modern naval guns, quick fighting guns, field guns, mine throwers, 1,200 guns in all. And these supply is for some army, 1,300 ammunition trains, 2.5 million shells. Some of the Germans had containers strapped behind their back. The Germans were trying out their new weapon. On the French, tons of burning oil. Per blood, compressed nitrogen turned men into giant torches, but their chains were really slow. But they made a new tank in 1916. It is called the Mark I. Their fighting finally was over, but many people were dead.
Hello, my name is Krista, and I am going to explain how a small-town girl from Illinois became so important to the early 1900s. Her name was Laura Jane Adams, and she started the Whole House in Chicago. When she was a child, she saw how people were very poor and had to live in dirty, run-down homes or sacks. She felt bad for the dirty children. She told her dad that when she got older, she wanted to buy a big house and let everyone in so she could help them. Her dream came true when she opened up the Whole House on September 18, 1889. The Whole House was a place where a person or family could receive food, water, and shelter. They could even get clothes and medicine. She helped many poor people in Chicago. She was always hands-on there. She served food and even helped to deliver babies. In 1918, Jane Addams was the first woman to win the Nobel Peace Prize. Sadly, Jane died of cancer on May 21st, 1935, at the age of 74. She said her plan in life was to aid in the solutions of life in a great city, to our neighbors, to build responsible, self-sufficient lives for themselves and their families. She did that and much more to help the poor people in the early 1900s.
Hi, my name is Cecilia, and I am going to talk about how the skyscraper affected the city growth in the 1900s. George Fluor is thought to be the inventor of the skyscraper. He solves the problems of the load-bearing capacities of tall buildings. The Flatiron Building was one of the New York City's first skyscraper. It was built in 1902. Many more skyscrapers were built in large cities like Chicago and New York City between 1884 and 1939. This helped modernize both cities, and their population grew. In early 1900, many skyscrapers were built. The needed for new office space to hold America's workforce began to grow. The economic boom of the 1920s saw even more skyscrapers beginning built in New York City. Many were designed in an Art Deco style. They had a lot of detail and very pretty decorated the skyline of Chicago and New York would look much different without the skyscrapers of the early 1900s.
Hi, my name is Yadi and I'm going to talk about skyscrapers and what I have learned about them. Skyscrapers first came to America in the early 1800s. The first people to build an Empire State Building in New York City were John Jacob Astor and William F. Lamb. Not only did William F. Lamb, or sometimes they just called him Lamb, had to make sure that nothing was missing. He has to make sure where the plumbing went. He had to make sure that everything was to be done on May 1st, 1931. They made it. They worked hard and they made it a huge success. And it was finished on May 1st, 1931. The skyscraper had 350 guests, and the skyscraper's lobby was made out of marble. The guests gathered in the lobby for its official opening. Now people go to the skyscraper in New York and visit the skyscraper. That was done by John Jacob Astor and William F. Lamb. And the skyscraper became part of the New York City skyline.
Hi, my name is Ethan. I'm going to tell you about Henry Ford. Henry was important to the 1900s because he was the founder of the Ford Company and the father of the moving assembly line. Henry was born on July 30th, 1863. He had 3 brothers and 2 sisters. Henry was married in April 1888 to a girl named Claire. After he got married, he had to get a job, so he didn't have a lot of time inventing. His first car was a quadricycle. It had bicycle wheels and a bicycle seat, and the rest of it was made out of wood. On November 6, 1893, a very special event took place for Claire and Henry. Their son Edsel was born in 1897. Henry started the Henry Ford Company. The thing that surprised me was that Edsel died on April 7th, 1952, only 5 years after his death. Henry was important in the 1900s because he was the founder of the Ford Company and the father of the moving assembly line.
My name is Caitlin, and I'm going to tell you about women's suffrage. I was surprised to find out that in the early 90s, women in America did not have the right to own property, keep the money they earn, get an education, eat because they have their own children, and could not vote. Women thought this was unfair and began to stand up together and fight for their rights. They started to go to college to receive a higher education. When men went to war, women stepped into their jobs. Times were changing and they began to have more rights, but they still could not vote. Women like Elizabeth Stanton and Susan B. Anthony started to organize. Women was held protests to show they wanted their rights to vote. After a great deal of effort by thousands of women, the 19th Amendment to the U.S. Constitution. They passed, giving women the rights to vote in 1920. Finally, women had the rights to vote. The U.S. Treasury minted Susan B. Anthony $1 coins from 1979 to 1981 to honor the women's suffrage movement and to show how important it was to change America.
Hi, my name is Fabio, and I'm going to talk about Esther Morris, a woman who was most important in gaining women's suffrage, which is the right to vote, in the early 1900s. In the early 1900s, women could not vote, only men. As a 6-year-old girl, Esther wanted to vote someday, but at the age 11, her mother died. When Esther was 19, she opened a hat shop in New York, and at 28, she married at a Miss Slack and had a son called Archie. She moved then to Illinois, and in 1851, she had 2 twin boys. One day, Esther asked the governor to give the women the right to vote on December 10, 1869. Then on 1869, women got the right to vote because of Esther Morris. It also surprised me to read that Esther helped nurse the sick, sew clothes, and help deliver babies, because it seems to me a very hard thing to do without even having a car. In the 1900s, it was important because women could not vote, but now they can vote.
Hi, my name is Jaden and I'm researching John Muir. He is important to the early 1900s because he kept the valleys safe and made sure that they didn't become farmland. Now I will share 10 interesting facts. 1. He was born on April 21st, 1838 in Dunbar, Scotland, near Edinburgh. 2. He discovered a family of field mice on a walk when he was only 3 years old. 3. He met a doctor when his little brother went to get vaccinated. 4. John had a farm growing up. 5. John's last name means wild land in Scottish, so he was named appropriately. 6. John lived in the wild, herding sheep for money. 7. He founded the Sierra Club in 1892, and many people have joined since. 8. He had 2 dog friends, a St. Bernard named Carlo, and a little black Scottish puppy named Sticky. 9. He married Louise Wanda Strutzel in 1980 thanks to her best friend Jean Carr. 10. He wrote newspaper articles about the wild for $200 apiece. Now I will tell you a fact that surprised me. John slept on rocks and streams and sometimes even cemeteries on his hike to Yosemite. John was important to the early 1900s because without him our valleys would be farmland and there would be no national parks. The end.
Hello, my name is Noreen. I'm going to tell you about World War II and why it was important. It was important because it was the first war women fought in, and they got to work for the first time. In 1939, World War II started. World War II started because of Germans. Some people protected themselves by wearing gas masks, and some women went to countryside. Some went to their animal shelters. They were made out of steel plates. They were used mostly in the night. In some houses there were Morrison shelters. They were underground and made out of steel. Most weak people were hiding because 300 people died every week. France and Germany fought a lot because Germany attacked France a lot. Germany was forcing people to join the active partisans of Holland. In Holland, 1,000 people joined it. Next, Japan attacked Pearl Harbor. That's when Americans got mad. Next, the leader, Winston Churchill, President Roosevelt, Johnson, Stanley were planning something to stop the war. Roosevelt didn't want violence, but it happened. They dropped a bomb on Japan, and Mexico helped too. They sent an airplane crew to help. This war was important because it was the Second World War, and the first time USA dropped an atomic bomb.
Hi, my name is Byron, and I'll be talking about World War II. A group of Germans formed a group called National Socialistic, or called Nazis for short. Nazis got so big, over 50% of the people were with the Nazi Party.
Nazis hated Jewish people a lot. The Germany's president, Paul von Hindenburg, made Adolf Hitler second most powerful person in Germany. People loved Hitler and some people hated him. The parents of kids who loved Hitler let their kids join a group called Hitler Youth. Hitler Youth is a group for teens who followed Hitler. Some teens got killed by Reds or Russians. Hitler became the most powerful man in Germany when Paul von Hindenburg died. Hitler became a dictator. Then Hitler became ruler of the Nazi Party. Hitler wanted a perfect country. He hated Jews a lot. In Poland, there were 3.3 million Jews, so Hitler said, attack Poland, and Germany attacked with tanks, and Polish had horses, few soldiers. Germany overpowered Poland, and Germany claimed Poland as their own. Then Germany made a camp called Auschwitz for over 1 million Jews and Gypsies, Catholics, and Christians. Also, Russian soldiers were either killed or forced to work. All women and children were shaved and tattooed. All Jews were forced to wear a star badge that said Jude. Jude means Jew. In 1944, USA bombed the work factories and cremation factories. By the end of 1944, Auschwitz was taken over by Russians and all of the prisoners were freed.
My name is Mackenzie, and today I will be doing a report on Women's Baseball League. America was in the middle of World War II. Baseball was at risk because as citizens saw generously paid athletes sliding balls while their loved ones were dying on unforgiving shores. Americans everywhere prepared for shortages in food, clothing, gas, and many other daily items. During all this, Charles Philip K. Wrigley wondered about baseball. Many men and women worried about keeping their money in houses. Baseball was a bigger challenge for women during the war. Women were building tanks, airplanes, trucks, and ships. Wrigley believed that baseball's survival depended on women during the war. By 1942, when Wrigley was forming his professional women's league, the sight of a woman wearing pants was no longer offensive, as it had been. But womanhood who complained were still frowned upon calmed history. Diane Helmer. Wrigley wanted women playing hardball instead of playing softball. And also the fact that surprised me was that Wrigley owned a gum factory and the Chicago Cubs. And that is how women's baseball is important.
Hello, my name is Crystal and I'm learning about jazz and the compliments of Duke Ellington. I will tell you why he was important to the early 90s. When I started to research jazz music, I read a lot about Duke Ellington. He was a famous band leader and composer. Duke was only 19 when he started his own band. He traveled around the United States with his band. In 1925, he makes his first live video broadcast and first recordings. He was one of the first African Americans that was wildly accepted by the people in America and Europe. During his life, he wrote 1,000 songs. Some of his most famous are "It Don't Mean a Thing," "In a Sentimental Mood," and "Don't Get Around Much Anymore." He continued to write and play music until he died in May of 1974. During his lifetime, he won many awards like Grammy Lifetime Achievement in 1966 and the 1969. He had changed the American music culture and continues to do so with founds from his escape that opened the Duke Ellington School of Arts in Washington, D.C. that opened after his death in 1974.
Hello, my name is Cynthia. Today I'm going to talk about jazz in the 1900s. Do you know how jazz got famous? Jazz got famous because of the slaves. They sang jazz and people started to listen to the jazz they played. Now here is another fact. Did you know that black men and women made jazz clubs? There are lots of books in the public library. They might even have the book Ella Fitzgerald, The Table of Vocal Victorious is a fiction book. Ella was a famous jazz singer. Jazz is a little different from the music today because now we have hip-hop and rock. I learned a lot about Ella. She was nice and kind to other people. One night Ella went to sing, and after she sang, she wanted to show them that she could be like them, and then she danced. I really enjoy learning about jazz music. I hope you check it out.
Hi, my name is Rosalinda, and I am going to talk about Georgia O'Keeffe, an early 1900s artist famous for her flower paintings and her paintings of bones. Georgia O'Keeffe was born on November 15, 1887. She was the second child of Ida O'Keeffe and Frank O'Keeffe. She was the oldest of 5 girls of 7 children. Her father was a farmer at a farm at Wisconsin. He had a dairy farm. He traded horses and cattle, and he also grew crops. The kids of the family grew up working on a farm. After school, the boys worked with the horses, and the girls learned to cook, sew, and tend the vegetable garden. In the summer of 1912, Georgia enrolled at a drawing course for school teachers at University of Virginia. In spring and summer, Georgia started painting flowers. When Georgia was 12 years old, she wanted to become an artist. Georgia would draw statues in the museums of Chicago. Georgia would also draw stuff that her teachers would think. When she was in New York, she would paint a garden in the cities. She wanted people to see the flowers the way she saw them. For some of her art, she would paint bones. She would use small bones, big bones, and large bones, and short bones. One fact that surprised me was that in spring and summer, Georgia started painting flowers. Georgia O'Keeffe was important to the early 1900s because she did art and painted big flowers and bones.
Hi, my name is Malachi. I'm going to tell you facts about Frank Lloyd Wright, a famous architect of the 1900s. Frank Lloyd Wright was born June 8, 1867. In 1950, the Japanese emperor commissioned Wright to design the Emperor Hotel in Tokyo. Frank Lloyd Wright worked for Louis Sullivan, another famous American architect in Illinois. While working for Sullivan, Frank Lloyd built 3 houses in Oak Park, Illinois, which are still standing today. Some Characteristics of his work are round front rooms, very long chimneys. Wright built a home for himself in a different style called prairie style, with low oven-hanging roofs, rows of small windows, glass doors between rooms, and a larger floorland plan. Wright's biggest challenge was to make a building strong enough to survive an earthquake. When Frank Lloyd Wright turned 91, he passed away.
Hi, my name is Devin, and I'm going to tell you about the Great Depression. The Great Depression ruined lives. Brother, can you spare a dime? Those lines from a popular 1930s song could have been the theme of unemployed workers in 1932, the cruelest year of the Great Depression. During an economic depression, factories dismissed, laborers, stores closed, and small businesses and farms fall into ruin. Short periods of depression followed by periods of prosperity have often occurred in the United States and other industrialized nations. Herbert Hoover was president when the Great Depression began. He declared in March 1930 that the U.S. had passed the worst and agreed that the economy would sort itself out. The worst, however, had just begun and would last until the outbreak of World War II in 1939. The causes of the Great Depression are widely debated. There was no single cause, but several things, when working together, made it happen. A weak banking system. The Great Depression in the United States began in 1929 and ended in 1941. It was the worst economic crisis in the history of the U.S. The whole world was negatively impacted by the Great Depression.
Hi, my name's Serenity, and my topic is the Great Depression. It's important because it started the disemployment of jobs. Here are 10 facts I learned. On Black Tuesday, October 29th, 1929, the stock market crashed. People seeing banks close, they rushed to withdraw their savings. This caused additional banks to close. Businesses and industries were also affected. Businesses were forced to cut back workers. Some businesses couldn't stay open even with cuts, and soon closed their doors, leaving their workers unemployed. During the Great Depression, the Great Plains were hit hard with both drought and horrendous dust storms, creating what became known as the Dust Bowl. The effects of drought caused the grass to disappear. With topsoil exposed, high winds picked up loose dirt and whirled it for miles. The dust storm destroyed everything in its path, leaving farmers without their crops. That's why it's important to the 1900s. It changed America in so many ways.